welcome to Dragon's Hoard. My name is Rebecca, and today we're going to go over my first ever cozy fantasy read, Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Maehrer. So this is actually my first ever dive into cozy fantasy. I've always been a romantasy, high fantasy, dystopian kind of reader, but I saw this and I wanted to give it a try. So Assistant to the Villain, I've heard very good things about this book, and I've also heard some bad things about this book, but I read the synopsis, I liked it, I decided it was something that I was interested in, so I bought it, and now we're going to go into a dive and see what we can learn about Assistant to the Villain. And if you're new here, my videos usually follow a very specific formatting, so we'll usually go over like just our introduction, then we'll hit a cover review going over all of the things, judging the cover of the book, the artwork, everything, just whatever I liked or disliked about the cover itself, a synopsis, my thoughts and opinions. Sometimes there are highlights, sometimes not, and then we'll hit things like the magic system, would I recommend this book to others. Sometimes I'll recommend a specific audience that I think would probably enjoy whichever book it is that we're reviewing the most, similar reads, and finally my outro. And now that we've gotten past that, let's go ahead and get into our cover review. That way we can talk a little bit about what is going on with Assistant to the Villain. Alright, so Assistant to the Villain. Usually I try to do my cover reviews before I actually read the book. I'll sit down and just write a cover review looking at all of the elements on the cover, because sometimes once you've read the book, then you know what everything is alluding to or symbolizes. But before you get into it, you're not sure what's going on the cover. Like here, we do have a very busy cover in Assistant to the Villain. So there's a lot of little symbolisms going on here. I did not actually write my cover review before reading this book, unfortunately. I should have, but I forgot. So we do have a lot of little symbolisms going on. We have a lot of little motifs, just a lot of things alluding to the fact that we are an assistant to a villain. So we have books on the bottom, looks like there's a fairy in a jar, a knight's helm shot through with arrows, a raven with a wand, we have some other medieval weaponry, apples, poisons, and a cute little bitty teeny tiny frog up here with a crown and a sign that says help instead of help. And the background of our cover is this very lovely periwinkle blue color. I really like that. I know it probably looks purple on screen or blue, but it's not exactly like that. It's kind of grayish blue is the best way to describe periwinkle. Anyways, the other thing that draws a lot of our attention on this cover is the fact that the lettering used for the title itself is so large. It's also done in a kind of cartoony style, which really draws your eye in directly to the title before you start looking around the cover and all of the little details that are going on all around said cover. And with this cover and the setup that it has, it does really give Megamind vibes. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, you should definitely watch it because it's hilarious. And so is this book, and it's really similar in a way. So before I keep yapping and end up throwing out spoilers, this cover gets a 4 out of 5 stars. I really like it. I just feel like there's something that's missing to said cover, but you know, oh well, whatever. It's a very solid cover. I do like that, and I also like the fact that the title is actually larger than the author's name. Whenever an author's name is larger than the title, I have a pet peeve for that. And here we can see at the bottom our author's name, Hannah Nicole Maehrer, is also done in white lettering, but not nearly as big as the title. Alright, so now we're gonna go ahead and jump into our synopsis. Just a little disclaimer before we start. When I picked this book up, I was slightly confused because I was expecting an urban fantasy going into this story. I don't know why, probably because it said Assistant to the Villain. I'm just like, wow, that's really officey, so I just thought urban fantasy. However, this book does have the medieval setting with castles and villages and townspeople, guards and knights and whatnot, as well as mythological creatures. So it does fall more along the lines of a high fantasy than an actual urban fantasy or anything thereof. So our story of the Assistant to the Villain begins with our FMC. Her name is Evangelina Sage, and everything starts out with Evangelina. Throughout most of the book, she goes by Evie. Everything starts out with Evie trying to get another job because she was fired from her previous job. And Evie is waiting in line to apply for this job and try to get it. But there's also a mother with children waiting in line, and she just looks so hopeful, and it breaks Evie's heart to think that she's going to take away the opportunity for this mother to provide for her children, her family. So Evie lets this mother have the job instead, and basically is going home empty-handed without employment. When she leaves, Evie does walk into the forest before heading home, and that is where she meets our MMC. And our MMC just so happens to be the villain, and they meet under less than optimal circumstances, in all fairness. But even though they're running and trying to keep themselves from being killed, they seem to kind of hit it off, and the villain ends up offering Evie a job working for him. And Evie's starting to settle into this position being assistant to the villain, but as this is going on, someone someone plants a bomb in the villain's office because they have like this big office area where everyone works. They have like accountants and general manager. I believe they have HR. They have an infirmary. Everybody's just working, doing all the paperwork. And then the villain himself has his own office connected to everyone else in this large communal area type office. Little cubicles is what I imagine in my head. I'm not sure if that's the accurate description. I feel like it is though. Now, because this bomb is planted in the villain's office, we do discover that there is a traitor in their midst. So someone is tinkering and plotting against the villain because he's had shipments of weapons and other goods that have been compromised. And now because of this, now not only is it the villain's problem, but as assistant to the villain, it is also Evie's problem. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, there can't be that many people working for the villain. He doesn't have that long of a list to go. It is said that he has 103 employees working under him. So yeah, it's a big operation. So slowly the villain and Evie, they're working together and they're like checking people off the list slowly once they decide, you know what, this person can't be it, this person also not it, and they're just working their way through the list. But while they're doing this, there are just constant roadblocks. They just keep hitting walls, wall after wall after wall, and eventually they're getting frustrated because it seems like the traitor, whoever's working against them, is privy to every single detail of every plan that they have. And while all of this is going on, while they're trying to deal with this traitor, whoever it may be, we also have the subplot of the villain doing everything he possibly can to subterfuge the king. And while this is going on, Evie, of course, is supporting her sickly father and her younger sister. She's basically her sister's mother because their mother is not in the picture in the story. And at the same time, she has an attraction to our MMC, the villain. And this, of course, keeps us hooked and moving forward throughout the story up until we reach the very climatic ending of this book, and it was delicious. So, thoughts and opinions. I have a whole ton of thoughts and opinions for this book. I found it to be absolutely wonderful. I adored it. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I thought it was fantastic. Considering that, since we've talked about what goes on in this book, let's talk about some other little details and what I thought about it. So this book is set in third-person POV. We do have alternating POVs. In my opinion, this really helps us appreciate everything that's happening and what's going on. We do mostly stay in Evie's POV, but we do occasionally switch into the villain's POV. I also enjoyed that because it like broke up the monotony a little bit. Not that it was monotonous, but it was refreshing to see another point of view. Now, since we were already talking about Evie, Evie seems to be the happy-go-lucky sunshine character in this story. And that's really impressive because life has not been kind to Evie. And considering this, the villain, of course, he's like this grumpy, gruff, somber character for the majority of this story. However, their dynamic plays out wonderfully. It is a great dynamic between these characters. I especially love Evie's humor. She's very humorous, even if it was a bit dark or dry at times. And I thought that this was interesting because with this dark humor, I mean, I'm sure it comes from all of the trauma that whatever trauma Evie has lived through her life. But with this, I felt that Evie does possibly have at least a little bitty twinge of darkness within her that she isn't demonstrating completely. Not yet. So that is an undertone that I got from Evie, and I'm expecting things to probably evolve slowly throughout the other books in this series. I believe this is supposed to be a 4-book series, if I'm not mistaken. I know 3 books are out already, and I believe the 4th comes out later this year, maybe. But besides that, I do love Evie. I think she's wonderful. She is a wonderful female protagonist because she does have her flaws. She isn't your typical FMC. She isn't overpowered. She's not exceptionally beautiful. She is intelligent and she has had to face things that many women in the real world actually face. And by that, I'm talking about the unfortunate and unsavory workplace harassment that happens in a workplace setting, among other places. But in our story, it is focused on a workplace setting. I will say is once we get the full story of what happened, because to begin with, we only have little tidbits here and there, it does become very heavy. So considering this, I would definitely recommend that you check out the trigger warnings just so that you're aware of what you might come across within this story, considering that is a bit of a subplot that we have to look at because it is what's driving our story a bit. And now for a little interlude with today's guest. This is Dante the duck. Isn't he adorable? He was swimming. He's kind of a dork. Very, very angry little creature, I must say. He doesn't like to be picked up. Okay, you can get down now. So, in case you're wondering, Dante the duck was purchased with another duck. However, the other one did not make it, and they were supposed to be given to a female duck that was sitting on a nest of unfertilized eggs. However, the female duck did not adopt them. So now I'm taking care of Dante, and he's adorable. Okay, back to Assistant to the Villain. So, as I was talking about this specific scene of what happens to Evie from her previous employer. I know the story is categorized as cozy, slow burn, comedic fantasy, but when that scene is happening, it did make me personally very uncomfortable, and I believe that is because in that space, those paragraphs, it felt like it was very real. It was very realistic in the way that it was described as happening. So just check out the trigger warnings from that. I do know that we do have some mentions of things like torture and murder and blood and gore, sabotage and magical beasts melting people with their toxic breath. But this is a fantasy. That is the typical fantasy layout. Okay, now we're going into a little bit of a spoiler because we're going to talk about the villain's name. And I know I've been calling him the villain throughout most of the first part of our book. This is how the villain is referred to. We don't know his name until later on, which it works, okay? Just trust me, it works. If I found it to be great. But I will say, personally, when we first read it, I hated his name. Hated his actual legal name. But as the book went on, it grew on me and I came to accept it. But it wasn't my favorite. And I will say, most of his employees only know him as the villain as well. They do not know what his actual name is, so I thought that was hilarious. But his true name, his legal name, is Tristan Maverick. I couldn't get behind calling him Tristan. That took me a minute. I couldn't do it until we saw a little more character development for him. And after we got that character development, then I was like, yeah, Tristan does kind of fit him. But in the beginning, I just couldn't do it. I tried and I was like, nah. But if you do decide to read this, then just give it a chance. I think you might come to accept his name eventually. So now that I've talked about some of these characters individually and the things they go through, some of the things that make up this story, now I want to talk about the book as a whole. So overall, I thought this book was very funny. It's filled with humorous comedic relief. I absolutely adored that. I guess is just my jam when it comes to thoroughly enjoying a book. I laughed so much reading this book that I actually had to physically take pictures of certain lines that I was reading and send it to one of my very close friends. And I was just editing it down to the sentence or two that I found to be absolutely hilarious because I had to share it with someone. I didn't have anyone else to share it with. I was just like, you know what? You have to suffer with me because this is great. And we don't have the same type of humor, but they did find it kind of funny that I would send them these random sentences and they're just like, what is going on? So I had tons of fun with the humor in this book. It tickled me pink. I also enjoyed the character development and the plot development that we do see throughout this book because both of them moved along nicely. They complemented each other really well. I would say both protagonists, the FMC and MMC, they both grow dramatically throughout the entirety of this book. And I will say by the end, we do have some pretty impressive plot twists that I didn't really see coming. Some of them left me stunned and some of them I was just like, girl. So it was just so good. Now, another thing that usually gets me is when we have slow burn fantasy romance. That usually irks me a little. However, in this story, I feel like it really worked well. I wasn't in a rush to see the characters get together or anything like that. I just felt like their relationship was evolving very naturally. And of course, this romance was a subplot, so it's not a main focal point of the story itself. So it is a subplot helping move things along, but not exactly what is moving things along. So the tension between characters was there, but it wasn't so pronounced that it just drove you absolutely insane trying to just wait out when they finally do come together. So overall, the entire pacing of this book I was very happy with. For the story's rating, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I wouldn't say that it's God tier or my Roman Empire shelf tier, but it was very enjoyable. I thoroughly enjoyed the story. It was an absolutely wonderful and fun reads, and I am finding that I really enjoy having fun reads that just make me laugh. Even if there are heavier topics mentioned throughout, fun reads just help uplift me in a way. And because of this high rating, I do have very high expectations for book 2, which is Apprentice to the Villain. I'm hoping that book 2 also reaches the 5-star mark, so those are very high expectations for book 2. And as for the spice, I would say this is a super slow burn. So that's not the focus of this story. There are a few lewd jokes, one very good kiss, and that's it. So our spice could be at, I don't know, zero.5 chilies, basically non-existent. And within this book, I did find many highly amusing passages. So I will be dropping some highlights. I'm sure there are spoilers in these highlights. I don't remember exactly which things I said. Hey, this is going into the video. Spoiler warning. I'm sure there are spoilers in here. Where? I don't know, but they're coming, okay? So if you want to avoid those spoilers that I'm sure are coming up, then just skip on ahead to our magic system, and then we'll just continue the video from there. Watching the highlights, if you haven't read this book already and you don't want spoilers, is non-detrimental to my review. Alright, so let's get into the highlights. Just to get us started off, so we have a little bit of an idea what the humor in this book is like. Page 52, we do start off with the villain. He's standing behind his door because he can kind of hear Evie humming in the community office because her desk, her workspace, is very close to his door. So she's humming and he's trying to listen in to hear what she's humming. And this is what he tells her after she slams open the door directly into his face. So it says, shaking his head, he glared down at her. Is there a reason you barreled into my office like a wrecking ball, Sage? Or were you just hoping to assault me with my own door? And the next thing that we have, Sage does come across something. I believe it's either a riddle or something like that she's not very good at. But she's reading something. She comes across something important. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the highlight that I wrote down is something that Sage is thinking about, that Evie is thinking about to herself. And it says, this is what you get for reading books with no naughty words in them. I think that applies to everybody on Book Talk, at least. Maybe not Book 2, but Book Talk definitely. And then, of course, since we are set in medieval village town type thing, they do have wanted posters. And these wanted posters have depictions of the villain, or at least what people think the villain looks like, because no one really knows what he looks like. So one day, someone in the town, they have some wanted posters of the villain. And Evie goes on to explain to us how the villain is being represented in this wanted poster. So it says, whoever was supposed to be represented in the wanted flyer wasn't just old, they were ancient. The nose wasn't even close, and the hair was wrong for many reasons. One of them being, it was on fire. His tongue was out and forked like a serpent. And Evie yelped when she saw a beard so long it covered most of the bottom of the page. Do you have another one of these? She pushed her smile down so hard it made her eyes water. Coughing, she said, I would like to make sure. I never forget the face of the traitor. Jane nodded, eyes glittering in approval as she reached into her satchel and handed Evie another awful poster, one she was going to frame and put right on her boss's desk. And then, as I was mentioning previously, we do have a dragon tamer, a beast tamer, because we are in a medieval world, you know. And I believe they're talking about either the dragons or a different type of mystical beast. It might be the other mystical beast. But this is an interaction between Evie, the dragon tamer, his name is Blade, and the villain. So we start off with Evie speaking, and she is exclaiming, "It's huge!" Evie gasped. Blade turned to her, then a sly smile on his lips. If I had a gold piece for every time, a loud smack wrenched through the air, and Blade winced and clutched the back of his head. The villain didn't even look in Blade's direction as he brought his hand back to his side. It's smaller than the dragon. So this is what I meant when I was talking about lewd comments, okay? And innuendos. There's a few in here. It's hilarious. And then another thing that I marked as a highlight was this quote. And this is Evie after some very disturbing events occur and she's having to deal with these things. And I really, really liked this quote because I feel like this could apply to everyone in a sense. And she's saying, we're all monsters in the end. At least mine lives in the light. So she's accepting the dark part of her. She's accepting the monster that lives within her. And she's making sure that not only does she know it's there, but everyone else is aware that it is there. And then we do see where Evie just takes the plummet into the dark end, and she is being attacked and she's trying to defend herself, but there's always the comments because she's a female and they're talking about her being weak, things like that, treating her weaker than them. And she says, I'm his fucking assistant, and smiled before whipping the dagger up and slitting his throat. That is all I have for the highlights that I would like to mention in this review today. I did find them all very interesting and empowering in certain aspects, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the magic system because it's a little bit different than things that we're used to. So in this world, magic does exist, but the abilities do seem to be few and far between, so it's not like everyone or every other person has magic. No, there's only a few people that have magic, and the only common factor seems to be that magic presents itself whenever a traumatic event occurs. Either traumatic or highly stressful. I feel like those things are pretty much the same thing. It's really stressful. You're going to get traumatized from it, most likely. If it's traumatic anyway, you're going to be stressed out. So they just like go hand in hand. But something traumatic or highly stressful has to occur to push you over the edge before you present magic. In this book, we don't really know more about how magic presents or where it comes from or what causes your abilities to manifest and the way that they manifest. These are just the general ideas that we get in book one. What we do know, though, is that magic can be imbued into items, and they can have specific actions when they're used. We also know that there are magical beasts within this world, and in book one, just like with magic, there are only a few that are mentioned. So we do know that dragons and pixies exist. Then there's something called a guivre. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. I imagined it as a quetzalcoatl, but with bat wings. And then, of course, we do have mentions of unicorns. Do we see a unicorn? No, but we do have mentions, so I imagine we'll see one eventually. Other than these creatures, we don't really know the extent of the amount of magical creatures that are present in this world. Now, would I recommend this to others? I absolutely would recommend this story to others. I honestly wish I had an actual camera instead of just my phone, so I could have done a reading vlog and record me reacting to this book, because this is an excellent book to react to. You get surprises. It's hilarious. Sometimes you're flabbergasted and you're just like, what are you even doing? So I do recommend this, especially if you're like a mood reader or you want something that's really funny, anything like that. I would definitely recommend this book to fantasy readers and romantasy readers, because I did find it to be very fantasy, romantasy coded. And especially if you're looking for something that's lighter than the average high fantasy, or the darker tendencies of fantasy being just focused on the death and war and murder and things like that. So overall, this book was just a ton of fun for me. Will I read the next book? Absolutely. I have already read the next book. I can't wait to finish this review and then jump into review of book 2. I've started book 3. We're getting the ball rolling once again, because I know I've been slacking. Similar reads to Assistant to the Villain. The only thing I can think of that does have a very similar vibe, it's slow burn, it's funny. The characters are a little contrasting, which I would say The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Bridget Knightley. I know I've mentioned this a million times, but I do absolutely love this book. This is one of my favorites. I don't think I'll ever not like this book. It is an enemies to lovers forced proximity. Slow burn, originally Draymond fanfic, but it has been reworked marvelously. You couldn't tell if you didn't know. As I said, I absolutely adore this book, so if you're interested, I would recommend picking this up or picking them both up and reading them, because I think they're great. Well, everyone, we have finally made it to the end of our review. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you had a good time hearing about the Assistant to the Villain, Evie Sage, or Evangelina Sage. If you enjoyed this review and would like to know more, or would like to be brought back for whatever I read next, then please hit that like and subscribe button down below. That would be absolutely delighted. If you have any questions or anything like that, then please leave a comment. All of my contact information is listed in my description, and yeah, we will find out soon what happens in Apprentice to the Villain. Until next time, guys. Bye.